Welcome to the System Simplified podcast, where we feature top leaders who share stories on how to successfully systemize a business. Now, let's get started with the show.
Hello, Hadi Klevit here, the host of the System Simplified podcast, where I feature top founders, entrepreneurs, and thought leaders about systematizing a business. And today's episode is being brought to you by Business Success Consulting Group, where we create, document, optimize, and implement processes and procedures so businesses can grow and thrive. And today's guest is Kasandra Murray. Hi, Kasandra.
Hi.
It's great to have you on this podcast.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Yeah, we're going to have a great conversation because we're going to talk about my favorite subject, which is systematization. And we're going to talk about marketing and systematization, which is basically your area of expertise. And I'm sure our listeners are going to learn a lot from this conversation.
Yeah.
But first of all, let me introduce you. I have your bio. I have to read it, and so the listeners know who you are.
Yeah.
All right. So you are a marketing and operation consultant, and you are the founder of Unlucky Umbrella Studio. That's a great name. We're going to dive into it and why Unlucky Umbrella. And where you help businesses bridge the gap between creative marketing strategies and structured operational systems. You know, Kasandra, I can tell you this is a topic that I wrote articles about, I talked about. It's like this concept or misconception of creatives that they think that they don't need systems. So that is so important, and we're going to dive into it. So you have over a decade of experience to develop frameworks that improve efficiency, strengthen teams, and create seamless customer experiences. You believe that when marketing and operations work together, growth becomes not just achievable, but sustainable.
Yes.
That's amazing. Okay, so Unlucky Umbrella Studio, where did the name come from?
Okay, so actually a lot of this derives from my college years. So we were supposed to build a brand. And for me, my brand felt like an umbrella that was flipped inside out. And at the time, my teacher had asked me why, this is such an unusual looking graphic for a brand. Why is this your brand? And I told her that I'm always prepared for the unexpected. So I come prepared, but sometimes things go sideways. And I've built my brand out with that. So a lot of times what I tell people is, marketing based on strategy, not luck, essentially. So I think that there are a lot of marketing firms out there that really kind of lean into the luck aspect of the results that they're driving. And what I want businesses to know is that when we work together, we're building a strategy together and not solely relying on things to just kind of work out in the end.
That makes total sense. And there is a story behind it, so people can remember it.
Yeah.
Cool. So, that connection between marketing and operation is so important because you can have amazing marketing and then you create a lot of leads. And then if you don't have the operations in place, then what? Right? And we can also look at marketing. If it's not systematized, if you don't have a system on how to do something, you can spend a lot of money and a lot of endeavor in one thing, and then it ends. And then what? So tell me about your idea about the connection between marketing and operations.
So I actually have a little graphic that's really cool, and it looks like an infinity 8 loop essentially. And one side is marketing and then the other side is operations. And you're explaining it exactly perfectly. Is marketing may bring leads to your door, but then what happens afterwards? And I think there's a lot of disconnect between what happens after they've given you those leads. What does your operations do? So what is that process? And a lot of systems and processes really impact the customer experience. And customer experience can lead to more referrals. It could lead to repeat business. And that's why I think that they work together. And when you're only focusing on one, say you focus really heavily on marketing, but not the operations, which impact customer experience, you get kind of a poor customer experience, which eventually your marketing's not going to work, right? Like if you build a reputation that you have bad customer experience, no amount of marketing can resolve that, right? And vice versa, right? So if you have a really good operations system, but nobody knows about it and nobody knows that you have great customer service, there again is that disconnect where your operations is working really, really well, but nobody knows that you offer superior service to your competition.
That's right. So how do you bridge that gap? What would you recommend to do?
So it really is going to depend on business to business, but I think like looking at where you're currently spending your money is really important. So a lot of businesses spend a ton of money on marketing and not so much in operations, and specifically in training. So there's like a stat out there that I think businesses spend 4 times on like hiring individuals versus taking that money and investing it into training individuals. And I think that's a huge gap in just about every industry. And you can see it when I work with a lot of businesses. A lot of them focus more on spending money on marketing and spending money on hiring, but not spending money on improving their internal processes or improving their training process and creating those employees that are exceptional at the things that they do. So I think really practical advice for a lot of businesses that they can approach is taking more time and money and investing in your training department.
Right. Okay. Absolutely. Because you do need to train. And I like that you're saying that because, so what effect does the training will have on that customer experience?
Yeah, so people who are confident in the work that they do are going to give a much better customer experience than people who are not confident in what they do. And that's where, that bridging starts to happen because your marketing is obviously going to talk about how you're the best at what you do, you're the best in your industry, and that's pretty straightforward. But you really need to walk the walk, not just talk the talk. So for me, a lot of like the training that we put in place is there's kind of people talk about like, I'm a visual learner or I'm an auditory learner or I'm a learner that needs to do. And what I have found is people need all three. So when we talk about investing into your training is not just bringing trainers on board, right? And training. You need trainers with documentation, with, recorded documentation, written documentation, and then giving people the actual opportunity to have a tangible experience with the training too. So you see a lot of companies right now are falling into this video training. I've seen where, you sit down for 4 hours of video training and they never let you touch the software that you're actually learning about. Those are those disconnects in training that a lot of people struggle with, or we have businesses that have absolutely no training. And it's kind of like you're thrown to the wolves and you have to figure out on your own how to do your job. And that's where the operations is very disconnected from the marketing. The marketing is touting this amazing service and product that you offer, but then your operations is falling short because none of your employees are confident enough to produce at that level that your marketing is advertising.
Absolutely. So what do you do when you go to company? A company gets engaged with you. What are the first steps?
Typically, I do kind of like an audit. And a lot of times I'll start in the marketing side first. And if they have any kind of data related to their marketing, I want in on that data. So I like to look at that data and understand, are they getting leads? Is the money that they're spending in marketing having any type of return on investment? And then from there, a lot of times I interview all the employees individually if I can, specifically in departments that they want to see improvements. And a lot of times it needs to be confidential because people sometimes are afraid to complain. And I have to explain to people, your complaints are exactly the operational issues that we have. Like, I need to hear those complaints. I need to hear what is, every day you come in and you go, oh, I have to do this again. I want to know what those things are because typically those are, things blocking you from being better at your job or creating a better customer experience. And then from those individual interviews, I kind of collect all that data together and then go to the management or the business owner and I say, here's what I'm seeing. Here's what your marketing's doing for you. Here's where your employees are struggling. And here are some different either processes we can implement, We can bring in software that could possibly solve some of those problems. So whatever it is, and a lot of times it's a very customized solution because every company is in a different stage, right, when it comes to their marketing and their operations. So it's a very customized experience for those businesses.
Right. So give an example of, tell us a story of a business you work with and the solutions that you implemented.
Yeah, this is my favorite story because I think it really shines a light on operations and marketing coming together. I had a business come to me and they're like, "Hey, we want to like double our spending in marketing." And I was like, "Okay, before we do that, let me see what your marketing is actually doing for you and try to understand what's going on there," because they felt they weren't getting enough leads. So they were spending about $40,000 on magazine marketing, and the magazine was highly targeted. So I started to look at the call data related to those advertisements. And from that call data, I found out they weren't picking up 50% of their calls. So I kind of went back to them and I said, "Listen, like we can double your marketing spend, but if you're not going to pick up the phone, it's not going to make a difference. You're still going to feel like you're not getting enough leads." I'm like, "So let's resolve this pickup issue that we're having." So they didn't have the bandwidth to put one employee on the phone all day long, essentially. And obviously, they couldn't hire employees to work over the weekend to pick up the phone as well. So what I did is I did a ton of research on call centers that could pick up the phone for them and what kind of features that they have. I interviewed, I think, 5 different call centers. I found one that worked really, really well for them. I helped set up the script for the call center. I worked with the call center to onboard the employees that needed to be trained in the system. And then I monitor the call system. And I still do that for them to this day. But they went from a $1.6 million company to a $3.6 million company within a year with that one change. And it didn't require putting more work on the employees. It didn't require a huge investment. In fact, it was cheaper to do the call center than hire a full-time employee. So that's a really good story that I love to share of how your marketing is doing your job. It's your operations that's falling short, and we need to work on the operations side to improve your marketing performance.
Absolutely. I mean, that makes total sense. And look at the results that you got. So that's great. When you go into a company and see that they don't have any training, what do you do?
So a lot of it is a cultural thing. The biggest reason I hear for why there isn't training or why there isn't documentation is there's no time. So what I try to do is slowly shift the business's mindset to progress over perfection. That's really big because a lot of people go, "Well, I don't have time to sit down and write down the whole process." And what I say is document while you're doing the process because you're already in the middle of it. You're already documenting. So the biggest change management that I have to work on is getting employees, one, confident that they can write an SOP and giving them feedback on how to write a productive and effective SOP. But also getting them to understand like why documentation is so important. So it really that's like the hardest part about what I do. And I think that's the thing that is the hardest part for any business is getting that cultural shift of it's okay, just make a little bit of progress today. Just document one thing today, or you learn something new today. Just write it down. So getting people really comfortable with that writing process.
Absolutely. I mean, that's why my company, like I started my company. When I started my company, I was doing general business consulting, and I would tell my clients, you need SOPs, you need processes in order to scale. And it would be week after week, and things do not happen, or even if they do one, and I coach them. But and then I said, "Well, how about if I do it for you?" And they go, "Really?" And that's where I had a client where I documented the entire, like basically a whole playbook. Obviously, it is not scalable for one person, like one consultant to do that. And that's why the company grew. And I have, consultants and technical writers, and we have a whole operation around it. But it was actually created because of that need, because, people usually it's either they don't have the know-how, or they don't have the time. And that's why we decided to provide that service. But what you said about understanding the why the SOPs are important, why having processes and procedures are so important, you have to understand that even to engage with our services, because otherwise you're not going to follow through with the program and with the project to do that. And that is spot on. This is exactly why my company exists is because
Yeah.
that's what I encountered as well, because it is a problem. Yes. So definitely understood on that. So cool. And what did you find? What do you find in terms of getting those processes followed by all, like getting the actual training stick? Yeah, they have to write the SOPs. We have to train, because that's what I find. Like, we don't just document, we also have to make sure that the processes are followed by all. And I am curious to hear your perspective of it. Is like, what do you do in order to make sure the processes are followed and implemented?
Yeah, so one thing especially when I'm trying to like implement processes, is I explain to people processes are living, breathing documents. So they should never be set in stone. And one thing that I try to, especially leadership, because I think leadership struggles with this mentality the most, is the process should be so easy that it takes more work to not follow the process than it does to follow the process, right? Because humans are humans and people are going to find the easiest way to get from point A to point B. And what you want is to make that process the easiest possible process, right? So that's one thing that is also like a cultural shift and a mind shift that I have to put on business owners. So a lot of times when we're like building processes and people are being trained on them, if they ask why, I think those are the best questions that you hear during building a process. Is someone go, why do I have to do this, right? And actually taking those questions, especially as leadership, seriously, because a lot of times leadership gets into that, like, because that's how we've always done it, or because that's how I think it should be done, doesn't actually like explain that why. So getting people to, edit documents and giving them the confidence to change the SOPs as well, I think helps train people on SOPs and makes them almost second nature, right? Like, my goal isn't to create a process that you have to constantly be reading. I want to create a process that maybe you read it 3, 4, 5 times, but after the 5th time, it feels like second nature to you.
Absolutely. I agree. Well, Cassandra, if our audience, our listeners want to get a hold of you, how can they do that?
Yeah, so you guys can find me on my website. My brand is pretty unusual, so if you look up unluckyumbrella.com, you'll find me. You can contact us through that site.
Absolutely. And that's really good that you have an unusual name, because you can't miss that and you can remember that. It's the unlucky umbrella. I guess the umbrella inside out is the unlucky part of it, right? It's cool. Great. Well, thank you so much for being a guest on this podcast and sharing your expertise. It was a great conversation about processes, about systematization, and why it is needed, and the connection between sales, marketing, and operations, and how both sides should be operating in order to be successful. So thank you for that.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Thanks for listening to the System Simplified podcast. We'll see you again next time, and be sure to click subscribe to get future episodes.